made a costume change. I got my shop apron on now. So one thing I thought of in the last video as I was rewatching these, which I hate doing, but is I misspoke a little bit with when I said that the radial arm saw was used for like a rip cut. Generally, with the type of blade that's on here, it's for cross cutting, getting to that rip cutting like on the table saw with the grain, and cross cutting against the grain. So I just noticed one thing I misspoke there. I'm sure there have been other instances that I've misspoke or gone over a little bit too quickly. So if you think you missed something, if I slurred my words, which happens with this, then again, just reach out, questions like I said before, to me or Chris, if you have questions. Cool, so we're gonna do radial arm saw and band saw, which are gonna be hopefully a little bit quicker than the chop saw and table saw individually. So, because a lot of the same rules apply and stuff, it's just we're gonna go quickly over operation. So radial arm saw, which is in front of me right here, we're just down, like 12 feet from our chop saw, which is in the background. So it uses the same bench here, so the type of material that we can cut on the radial arm saw, woods, foams, and plastics. Same material that we can do on the table saw and the chop saw, but the chop saw can do aluminum, which is a little bonus material that we do sometimes, but not super often. So woods, foams, plastics, so the types of materials we can cut on here. Most of the time we're doing wood in the shop. Stick goods is what we're gonna also cut most of the time on here. We've got some 2x4 on the rack in front of me here. We're gonna cut some 1x6 as an example. So if you can see a little bit here, the teeth on this blade, as I mentioned, are closer together and smaller. So that general design there is generally meant more for like cross cutting. So what the radial arm saw can do is a bit deeper cuts here. You can see we've got more of a stick out here compared to the chop saw. So like plywood that we ripped with the grain, maybe that we cut to, I don't know, like 1 foot, it can go about up to 16 inches wide. We could bring over from our table saw and we could do a cross cut against the grain there maybe. We do things like that. Or like Luan. That's the blade that's on the radial arm saw there as a different kind of example that we've seen with the chop saw and the table saw. To turn this guy on, we've got a kind of different setup compared to the chop saw. We've got a power button that we just pressed here that'll go ahead and green button for on, red button for off for our setup. It does have dust collection there on the back as well. So for operation, like I mentioned, it's going to be very similar. We would mark out our piece like I showed you on the chop saw and take into account the blade thickness and all that when we're marking it out. I'm not going to do that as an example here. I'm just going to do a regular old cut and cut a little bit off. We've got our fence that we back up against to here. We're flat here, and tight grip with our left hand here is how I'm going to operate. This one you can only really do right-handed. So you come over here left-handed, it makes it a little harder to see because this arm that's sticking out. If you're wondering why it's called a radial arm saw, there is other options here of like tilting here. We could turn the whole unit here and do angle cuts out this way. We can also raise and lower this guy. I'm not going to show that as an example because we hardly ever do that in the shop, but it is an option. Cool? So safety, glasses, ear protection as always with a lot of these big power tools. Cool, so as you saw there, it pulls straight out. It's not like out through and down through with the chop saw. So I love this because it's great for doing a lot of the same cuts, easy straight cuts. If you're needing to cut like 10 boards to 10 feet or something, this is a great one to use because the operation is a little more simple. It's just a smooth pull out. It also is on like a tracking system with a cable here, so if I let go, it will slide back, so be aware of that to let it hang on to it, slide it through. There's the handle here you grab onto. Other things you can see is we've got our tool guard on the top here. It doesn't move out of the way because the blade's already exposed there like on the chop saw. And it's just a smooth motion here that you saw that I did all the way through, not too fast and not too slow, just like on the chop saw. nice fluid motion. All right. I think that's everything in general for the radial arm saw. We'll jump over to the bandsaw. All right, so now we have the bandsaw. So this one will be pretty quick also, hopefully. Just gonna go over operation. Same thing, radial arm saw, we can cut woods, foams, and plastics. The material that we can cut on here. No metal or aluminum. We've got another bandsaw actually that we'll see over in the metal area that's meant for metal and things like that. So the bandsaw, what it's meant for, you can see it looks quite a bit different in terms of the blade and stuff compared to the stuff that we've been doing. We're not going to be using this to like cut framing or big sheets or anything, or ripping down sheets or cutting big long stick goods that we've been doing. The bandsaw is great for doing like little detail cutouts, curves, and things like that. If you were doing your projects in person, that's been for this class before, this is a saw that gets used a lot because you can do intricate little prop design things and little wood design toys and stuff. So that's great for the bandsaw. Same thing, we've got the bench here, a flat surface that we slide the material on and through. The blade on this, you can just see it right here hanging out. It turns. There's two big wheels inside here. There's one up top and one bottom, and they turn in there to spin this giant band of a blade here. So that's the bandsaw. And so to turn the guy on, you can see here on the left, I've got a big power button here, green button. Again, this one, you turn it on. It's slow to stop. Well, it just kind of kills power and it keeps spinning slowly, but it is off now, but it's still spinning for a little bit, so be aware of that. You can see there's a little fence here. This is okay to use. What we'll do is maybe rip blocks of foam on here and cut through, so that's a good thing. This isn't the most accurate fence for ours. It's even labeled on there that it's not. You can kind of clamp the front and the back if you're needing to use the fence. But as I mentioned, we're not like doing this to get like real accurate framing cuts and stuff like that for the bandsaw. We're doing more curves and things like that. So the fence doesn't get used. It's here if you need it for some reason, but we don't use the fence a whole lot. And so to adjust guard and things like that, we've got a guard here. The blade, we have a clearance of about a foot here, so we can do really tall things. That's what's also really great about the bandsaw and an extra feature. You know, there's a lot of things that we can do on the bandsaw, as I mentioned just a second ago, like big blocks of foam that we have that we can rip down and cut shapes onto. So to adjust this guard, say you need to do something really tall, there's a knob on the back you loosen, and then you turn this wheel on the side and you can see it raises. So just like the table saw where we don't want as much blade, we want as little blade exposed as possible. It's not quite the same where we just want the kerf, the tip of the blade above the material, but you basically just want enough where you can see what you're cutting and that you don't have inches of blade exposed, mostly for safety there, to protect yourself. And lock that knob on the back down. For other things, the bandsaw, this is more not necessarily something that you would have to worry about if you were using, but something for me and maintenance things, is there's different widths of blades. So whenever we want to do like tighter curves, we're going to use like a thinner blade. So this one's a 1/2 inch wide here. We do have ones that go 1/4 inch and they can do tighter curves. The reason the 1/2 inch is on there is we can get like straighter, more accurate cuts with that. So it just kind of depends on the type of project you're doing and what material you're cutting through. 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch are good basic ones to have for a general setup. It's also got these bearings and guides up here at the top and bottom. Those kind of help guide it. You don't want to, when you're doing curves and stuff, I'll do a little example, but if you're doing really tight curves, just be aware that you don't want to like twist the blade too much, because these blades are really thin, as you can see, and they can snap. Sometimes it just happens, wear and tear on the blade maybe, but if you're cranking it too much and turning it, and then you run the risk of snapping the blade as well. So just be aware of that. Just like any of the saws, you just get used to kind of, especially doing curves and things, it just takes practice. So if you ever do get work on this and need to do a project on a bandsaw at any time, I recommend like grabbing some scrap pieces and just getting warmed up to it if you've never used one before. All right, so I'll do a little example. Safety glasses, ear protection, all that. This is not as loud of a saw, but still nice to have the ear protection on. I could come in, I push flat. What you want to make sure as safety, I can get my hands a lot closer in this saw because I'm doing more detailed things, but do not have your hand behind the blade there just in case maybe your hand slips and you catch your hand. So I can do a little turn. I could also, if I wanted to, back out all the way, come in from the side and lop that off. Kind of give my more room to work with there. Don't worry about that little piece hanging out. It'll get out of our way. I don't know, we'll come in through here. You can push with one hand just as long, you know, as you're pushing from this side. I've seen people try and pull it from this side. You want to be standing with a good base. Here in the front, still hands flat down. I think sometimes people can get a little lenient with the saw because it's more for detail things. It's not as loud, but it's still a spinning power tool. It can cut your hand, cut your fingers if you get too close to it or slip up. Cool. I think that's everything with the bandsaw. So we're gonna, in the next one, we're gonna leave the wood area and jump over to the metal area. I want to kind of jump around and just give you an overview. I don't know if we ever got like a full overview with all the saws over here. So again, we did table saw, chop saw, radial arm saw, and bandsaw over here in our wood area side of the shop. So like I mentioned before and have a few times. Any questions, reach out to me or Chris. Cool?